right, so today we're going to look at an overview of the final rule on clinicaltrials.gov registration requirements. So historically, we have been required to register our studies, and we know that that hasn't always been what folks are doing. So we're going to look at that final rule for registration, for reporting the results, expanded registry in terms of gathering information about our devices and expectations for what we're including and what we're not in terms of approved versus not approved devices and drugs and biologics. And we'll talk about the results data bank that the National Library of Medicine hosts, as well as any penalties for not being compliant with this requirement. We'll look at the role and expectations of the responsible party. So we'll talk about determining that applicable clinical trial, determining who is the sponsor, and then who serves as that responsible party and their roles and responsibilities. We'll look at the requirements. We'll also look at the requirements, as we said, for registration as well as results. Talk about 2 documents that are now expected to be submitted with the results information, how we can publish, or how NIH is going to publish our results, and how we can have potentially delays in that information. And we'll look at, as I mentioned earlier, what those expectations are for products that are approved versus not yet approved. So the final rule talks about, obviously, registering our studies and summary results. And we have to incorporate safety information. This is going to be aggregate data, very, very high-level data. But as we know, we're gathering information not just from our drugs and biologics, but our medical devices as well. The expectation is that by using this registry, I mean, really the whole purpose of clinicaltrials.gov was to give potential subjects access to information about studies that are being conducted in their disease state, in their therapeutic area, in their geographic location, or where to find that information. So really looking for studies where they might be eligible to participate. This is the registration requirements are really the responsibility of that responsible party, which we will discuss more in just a moment. Why are we registering these studies? So not only just access, but we want to make sure that these studies are out there so that they can be reviewed in terms of what's going on. Do these make sense? Who's doing what? So this all feeds into the protection of subjects, the integrity of research, really relying on evidence-based medicine, and looking at how many studies are taking place in a certain area. How else should we use our resources in research? And even though the primary focus of the use of this registry is for potential subjects, we all know that from an industry standpoint, we are using it as well. So who's doing what? Where is this taking place? Does this work for us? So really the purpose of human subject research is to get good data from protected subjects, and this is one of those initial steps. And the expectation is that we are thinking through our studies before we go ahead and place them on the registry. Is this a study that is well thought out? Is it going to give me the results? Have I really thought through everything? So it's one of those first steps in helping us meet our goal of good clinical practice. So the regulatory requirements, 42 CFR 11, are broken down into these general areas or subparts of consideration. So general provisions, the registration piece, results information submission, and then we have information about additional submissions. So NIH says you can register whatever you want. There are certain requirements, but you can do voluntary submission of your studies. And we've seen this in the past with some sponsors who have registered their phase 1 studies, even though under FDAAA that was not a regulatory requirement. And then we also have to be mindful that there are potential legal consequences of noncompliance. So we'll discuss those as well. And those can be pretty hefty. So what has happened? So when FDAAA first came into effect on the 26th of December of 2007, we were required to register those applicable clinical trials. And we found that Not only were studies not being registered, but certainly the results were not being provided, or they were not complete, or they were not accurate. So another pass-through is that we are going to specify and give more detail about what is an applicable trial, what are those expectations for submissions for those results, and clarifying those timelines. So registration of results reporting needs to be done on that legally defined timeline, which we will discuss. Organizations that sponsor studies are going to be held accountable. So a few years ago, the NIH gave the FDA authority for going in and checking this information when they go and do their inspections.